Okay, if you haven't already, please place yourselves on mute. Everyone at this time. And can you hear me okay? We're going to have a little challenge for me tonight as I'm having problems with audio. Okay, I got the thumbs up. Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connection. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host for the evening, along with Jennifer and Beth in the Zoom room. And we're excited that so many of you are joining us this evening. It's a little chilly out here in southern Indiana, and I know across the U.S. we've got temperatures all over the place. So we're just glad that you're here. If you haven't already, please use the chat room and let Sharon know how you identify in the constellation and where you're from. And if you're joining us for the very first time, we also like to
yes,
as well. Again, please place yourselves on mute for those of you that haven't. And before we get started, we have some housekeeping items. We like to remind everyone this is a public. Lost the slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, I showed the wrong one. I didn't hear what you said. I thought we lost you for a second. Okay, where did that one go? Oh no, I had it up. Okay, I'll have it here in a second. I was looking at the one, but it wasn't what was showing to you.
Yeah, it was there for just a few seconds.
Okay. Okay, give me a second here. Try it again.
Okay, this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared in our private happy hour group on Facebook. So if you're not following us there, please join us. And this is where Sharon's replay will come later on. Please remain on mute, raise your hand on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You're welcome to post your questions or comments in chat. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988.
Okay, here we go with the right one. This is a quick overview of all of our programs here at NAAP. We have Adoption Happy Hour, the first and third Friday of each month. We have Dr. Joyce's support group for reunion, putting yourself back together after reunion. Usually it's the second Tuesday of the month. They had a great meeting this week. We also have First Families hosted by Amy Seek and Amber Jimerson, and that is the second Thursday of each month. And then we close out the month with Danielle Gaudette's Self-Love Essentials for the Adoption Constellation, the fourth Thursday of the month. So there's all sorts of opportunities each month for you to connect with the adoption community. Okay, we're going to talk about Roots Tech. We are so excited about how soon it'll be here. I think it's 97 days. Jen's going to show a video and then I'll have a couple slides. Okay, that showed you a lot of highlights from the last event, and we are expecting bigger and better than ever this time. So, let's see here. It's at the wrong end. Okay, there we go. With that great skyline of Denver, April 25th to the 28th at the Hyatt Regency, NAAP, and Right to Know will host the second Untangling Our Roots. This is a quick overview of all that's going to happen. And I wrote over here on the side, all of this all together on one floor. It was so cool last time that we just owned the second floor of the hotel there in Louisville. Everything we did, we were all together on that floor. For the entertainment, we had our meals together, 50 plus speakers. Two new things we have for this summit are creative workshops where you will actually get to do something, hands-on activities that can help in the processing of all we deal with DNA surprises and adoption. And we also, our other new addition are small affinity support groups. You get to choose a group of people to hang out with that have things in common with you. So you will get to meet each other before on a Zoom. You'll be together during and one following. So that's an exciting thing that we are looking forward to. We are jumping up and down happy about Brian Stanton being the MC for our event. And when we announced this on Facebook and across social media, people were just as thrilled as we are to have Brian be there with us during this special time. This is just one of the many, many sessions. We'll have a plenary speaker panel where we will have someone from each of our 3 communities sharing their experiences and giving us insight onto how they have managed and coped and healed and grown through all that they've been through. This is we call this a schedule at a glance. This is on the website for Thursday and Friday, Saturday and Sunday, but we also have a very detailed schedule on the website where you can see who is speaking and who will be on each panel and all of that. And I will be putting links in just a moment in the chat so you can get to all of that. We have new and old t-shirts available. The one in the middle, family is and not or, is a new one for this year. We will have a new one with the logo that says Denver. And of course, we're going to have our fabulous DNA Don't Lie one. And I think we're going to be changing the year on that. But, and there's another one in the works, another t-shirt. You get to order these ahead of time so you have them and you can wear them at the summit. And that link will also be in the chat here in a moment. So I think we're actually a little past save the date if we're 97 days away. So what we need to do is purchase your ticket. And there are still about half of the early bird tickets left, but you don't want to wait and miss because the price will go up after those 100 are gone. So like I said, links will be in the chat in just a moment, and we hope to see all of you there in 97 days.
Is that all, Beth? You have anything else?
That is it for me.
Jen? Do you have anything else? Okay, you're good. Okay. All right. Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome Sharon Stein McNamara this evening to Adoption Happy Hour. So welcome, Sharon. You've got yourself on mute. Go ahead and take yourself off mute. Still on mute.
There. Now, can you hear me
There
okay?
you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is the screen sharing okay? You see
Looks
the screen.
good.
Okay. So, hey everybody, it's so great to see so many people that I already know and have, done groups with before, and I feel like this is such a great community. I am a psychologist. I actually went to the same program that Dr. Joyce went to, but I was just about, I think 8 years behind her. So I have studied developmental psychology, and I'll go through I'm going to try to go through these slides fairly quick and spend more time on the stories that I want to tell you about my own journey of well, the whole process. I'll just dive right in. So this is a shortened version of a talk that I usually give to adoption professionals to try to teach therapists how to be better at working with adoptees. So you are a kind of a different audience for me, but I'm really excited, and we are the experts. We, those who have lived the story know way more than any adoption competent therapist that hasn't had the experience can know. So anyway, so I did get all the formal accolades. I've got the permanency and adoption competency degree, and I've worked as a clinical psychologist since 1993. So there I am, little girl, little Sharon. I was adopted as an infant in 1959. Many people call this the baby scoop era. I think it was 6 weeks in foster care. There's different stories. I did find all my old records, so I was able to get the date that my birth mother signed was 30 days after she gave birth. So I was in some kind of foster home for the first 30 days. I was going to say too, if people have, rather than stopping and checking the chat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go through, and then we talked about going off of the record so then people can feel more comfortable. And then I'll go through and answer questions in the chat at the end. But I will stop so that we have hopefully 30 minutes or at least 25 minutes for questions. Does that sound right, Beth? That's what I talked about with Marcie before. So, okay. So I feel freer now to talk about my story because my parents are all gone. And I work with adoptees at every level. I also work with families. I have a lot of stuff to say about the family dynamics because that's really where I think the meat of our work is dealing with, how do we coordinate all these families? We have birth family, we have adoptive family, we have extended family, we might have a divorce family, so coordinating the family piece is where you can do your I think the most interesting work as a therapist too. So you probably know all these statistics, but 1 out of every 25 US families has adopted a child. 7 million Americans are adopted. In 2014, there were 11.4 infant adoptions per 1,000 non-marital live births. And it has, so this is for therapists to be able to know every therapist in the US is likely to have 10 to 15% of their caseload. And do they know much about adoption? Not always. So, and I know people in this group have had experienced not great therapy probably. So I'm not going to go through all the stats. I wanted to share this piece because this David, I don't know if people know about this. The book Shared Fate was written by H. David Kirk. It was revised in 1984, but he talked about that there is a shared shame with all members of the triad or the constellation because infertile couples, at least my adoptive parents were ashamed of their infertility and they didn't talk about it at all. They never told us why did they adopt. They were just like, well, we just wanted you, and then I found out later that my father probably had mumps in the service that left him sterile, but they couldn't talk about it. My dad would say, oh, it's your mother's issue, or my mother would say it's my dad's issue. So they avoided the topic at all times. So this is my original family that is about 1965. You can see my sister there. I hope the pointer points it. I'm in the middle, brother, sister, dad, mom. So that's the Stein family. We all know about these famous adoptions. A lot of people talk about the Moses concept of to be the chosen one, to lead your people home, that kind of thing. anyway, I love stories about adoptees, and only recently did I find out that many adoptees also have gifts. We all have these complex things. So like when you think about Marilyn Monroe, um, I mean, she was clearly had, trauma and, anxiety and that, but she also had this incredible magnetic personality who could just, she knew how to turn it on too. I saw a bio of her that talked about how she knew how to get herself ready to be in the state, to be like so open with no boundaries, to be able to just bring everyone in. So I don't want everyone to think that it's all trauma. There's also gifts. So, you guys all know this, but for me, this was a big moment when the girls who went away first came out. That was my first coming out of the fog, because I went to a film about it, and I had already met my birth mother. I knew that there was something probably different to me about me, because sometimes I would have anxiety and I would get upset and I would have big emotional reactions. But it wasn't until I went to that, and Ann Fussler answered my question live as she talked about her movie, and she said, "Oh yeah, don't you know? Adoption is a trauma. We now know that it's a trauma." I did not know. I knew that there was this book, The Primal Wound. I think it came out maybe a little bit before her stuff. But my parents had just, they quoted to me all the time the beliefs about, you are a blank slate. You are just to be molded by us. What does a tiny baby remember? You should have no reason to be upset. You can't remember any of that. So these are the core issues in adoption treatment. Most of you probably have already seen this. This is constant and continued. So the loss, rejection, the guilt and shame, grief, identity, intimacy, mastery, and control are all constant in the therapy that when I work with clients and families. Is these themes are constantly responded to. And what I've learned now is that when the anxiety comes up, or the shame or whatever, is to help the person think about that as a memory. This is a pre-verbal memory that is coloring your perception at this moment. And then that has been a big way to help differentiate when you're in the middle of like a shame spiral, or I've had this throughout my life. I would have a friend and I'd want to go to lunch with them, and they would like forget about the lunch, and I would immediately take it as they hate me, they don't like me. I'm overreactions to these areas that are because of the anxiety or the trauma reactions. So I wanted to just celebrate Minnesota. Finally, July 1st this year, we got this passed, and most of you probably know Gregory Luce, and it's just amazing that he was able to get this legislation carried through. So there's probably going to be, I've been giving this talk to Minnesota therapists, because it's like, we need to get ready for it when the people are going to start talking about finding their original birth certificates, and we need to be ready to prevent suicides and help adoptees feel safe in their process of connecting with their birth family. So this is the old story, of the victim of abandonment, loss, orphan, neglected, and the adoptive parents are the rescuers, saviors, providers, and the birth mother or birth parents sometimes in the past have been looked at as being having a problem. I know my birth mother was viewed to be loose or a whore, and my adoptive father would often say things like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and we're very concerned when I developed into puberty. So if any of you know family systems therapy, this is similar. This is called the Karpman drama triangle. So there's the this is every plot of any soap opera. There's a persecutor, a rescuer, and a victim. And it's so similar to this adoption triad that it's really easy for our brains to just fall into the who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who's the victim, who's the rescuer. And I want to, spend a lot of time with families saying this does not work with adoption any longer. There are continuums on every one of these sides. The persecutor can often be a person who is also trying to hold people accountable. A rescuer can also be somebody who can guide and coach. The victim can also, and these things are also very unstable. They switch around a lot of like, who's the good one, who's the bad one. It does not work. So what I do like is the adoption symbol, which is I believe is attempting to shift this old way of viewing that there's good people, bad people, victims and persecutors and heroes, and change it to a more, everybody has their perspective and their perspective is not wrong. We need to figure out how to work with all the people touched or affected. So the biggest thing as an adoptee is this big thing that you're doing in your growing up years is, how do I find my identity? Am I the hero, or am I the chosen one for rescuing my adopted parents from infertility? Am I supposed to pull the family together by being the bad one? Often that's I've seen many family systems where the adoptee flips from being the hero to the scapegoat, the hero to the scapegoat. And the biggest thing we need to do is get the whole triad to see that there is multiple perspectives and there isn't one right way. So I'm just going to talk about these adoptees need to move out of these dichotomies. We need to find a way to possibly love adopted parents. Many adoptees just find that it's just not possible and have cut off ties with adopted parents. In my work, I have done a number of reunifications when I've worked with the adoptive parents to be able to teach them how to hear their child, hear the multiple perspectives, hear that having a birth family is really important, and try to get those parents to, rather than be offended by the search, or it is to teach them how to see things from a both and versus an either or perspective. So many of you probably seen this before, but this is Erik Erikson was himself, I believe he was orphaned or he was adopted. He has a complex identity, but as a developmental psychologist, he really, I thought, put these conflicts that all children go through, but adoptees go through them so much more intensely. The basic trust versus mistrust. So, for example, in my family, there was a core wound that happened for me, which was around sleep, and that was because my parents were told by the Children's Home Society of Minnesota that you should never let your child into your bed, and that if they ever get in your bed, they'll never leave. So you need to figure out how to teach them to sleep through the night without needing you. So I was shut, the door was shut. I cried myself to sleep. They thought that that was okay. They thought it was normal. I now know that that is probably crying yourself to dissociation, or that it ruins the core trust. So even as an adult, I still have trouble at times with sleep, and I have to really work hard on self-care and figuring out what my needs are to be able to get myself to deal with sleep. The early childhood, 1 to 3 years old, is I can do it myself versus shame of I can't do it myself, or I didn't do it right, or I did it, and many adoptees have learned that we're really strong on the autonomy, many of us, because you can't count on anybody but yourself. But then there's a feeling of like, can I actually ask for help? Initiation versus guilt is about figuring out how to have tasks. I have a story of when I was 5 years old. I went to school for the first time at a new school, and I was riding the school bus. I didn't know exactly where I was. My mother, my adoptive mother, put the the bus number and her phone number pinned to my shirt, but basically said, you're going to get on the bus and you're going to go figure this out, and you need to figure it out. Well, came time for the bus to leave. I didn't remember to look at my shirt, and I didn't know the bus number. I missed the bus. I literally cried so hard that I went into dissociation. And I remember like losing consciousness and then coming back to, and then realizing, oh, and she was like confused, like, why were you that upset? Did you think I wouldn't come and get you? But that is what I thought. I really did think that this was another one of those complete losses where she would never come back. School age is figuring out how to be. I always felt like the way to be good is you get there early, you start, you do your best. You have to be superior, because being inferior is felt like it would be too shameful. So really, school was my safety place where I was able to figure out how to do well and to not be inferior. So it doesn't win you a lot of friends, but it gets you good grades. And in my case, it was able to get me, into graduate school at Harvard and be able to become a psychologist. I'm going to keep going, so I'll add more. Identity versus confusion is when a lot of the anxiety about who am I comes to the surface, and that also hits for many adoptees with the feelings of, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can become an adult. And the suicidal thoughts are what come up for many people at that time. So I told you about, I had a story of trying to hang up my clothes on the clothesline. And my mother was such a perfectionist, Betty here, that she wanted to teach me to do it right. And she completely missed the point that having a 5-year-old learn how to hang up clothes on a clothesline is not about doing it perfectly. It's about getting her to get them up there at all. So I worked so hard and I got them all hung up. And then she took them down and repinned them all. And I went into a complete shame spiral and still, remember that. So that was a trauma reaction. I'm going to talk some about the brain reactions. So here's my birth mom, found Kathy, 1982. So, gosh, what was I? I must have been, actually, I think I found her early. I found her when I was 23. So that would have been 1959. I'll have to do the math, but this is a picture from 1982. So I think I had found her before that, and I went through Children's Home Society of Minnesota. She was an unwed mother, 19 years old. My birth father didn't want to marry her. She was basically pressured by her parents that, her life was going to be ruined. And so she decided to just, after she fought it, she fought for 30 days, and she did visit me in the foster home. So I found this all out after I was able to get the papers. And this is Vern Knudsen, my birth father. So this must have been a year after I was born. I know that, so we talked about intimacy versus isolation. And one of the things, I was one of those people who had this constant problem of finding men who would not commit. I had 3 or 4 like serious long-term boyfriends that I lived with. And we would get right up to the like, okay, what are we going to do? What is this relationship? We're living together. What, can't we get married? And they would freak out and say, I'm not ready to commit. And then I would be heartbroken again. Well, they have a Freudian saying, is that which is repressed is destined to be repeated. And I believe that that's true even for ancestral trauma. So if you're wondering, like, I keep having this cycle and it keeps repeating, you know what? It might be passed on from your birth mother or your birth father, and you don't know why. So what I try to do when I work with people is if they've got a repeating cycle, is I go, let's go back, get all the information we can from your records, from the history, from whatever you can find. Because by getting that information, when I saw him and I met him in 1996, I met my husband within 2 months of that date. And then we got married a year later, and I've been married to him since. So it was like I had to put a face to whatever happened and then realize it wasn't my fault, and that I don't have to repeat this trauma cycle of this bad story that I kept living. So the trust versus mistrust, there's also a bio-brain part of this. Nancy Verrier first named it as the primal wound, but now we know all this new brain research says that the separation of mother from infant after birth is a point of developmental trauma. The brain is wired, an infant is wired to find mother's voice, mother's smell, mother's presence after birth. The child tunes out other voices. So basically what happened to us, if we were completely separated, like that they used to do the practice, my birth mother, Kathy, told me that she was told not to bond with me, not to touch me, but she just disregarded that and she went to the foster home and she did that anyway. So she was able to see me there, but I wasn't held by her, I believe, right after birth. That I was a breech birth, and there was like medical issues, and I think that was another reason why they weren't sure if my hip was dislocated, because I was breech, like a frank breech, and then they wanted to make sure that I was okay physically, before, uh, you know, bringing me to an adoptive family. It's like you don't want to sell them the tarnished goods, or that's that feeling about adoption as a commodity. Or so you all know the primal wound, and I won't go into it, but the baby does not know why they are suddenly in a new environment with strange sounds, smells, sights, tastes, and touches. A baby's not able to articulate that she can't sleep because your home doesn't smell the way her baby brain expects in order to be calm and go to sleep. The child's brain says, be on alert, this is not right. This memory can be reawakened during the adolescent to adulthood transition. In my case, I fell in love with my first love, and it was like, wham, that was like all those feelings, and the brain was turned on. And then he broke up with me like 4 months after that, and I was absolutely devastated, and had suicidal thoughts. And the other story about shame, and many trauma victims, just as we adoptees, have feelings of like, there's something wrong with me because I have a high startle response, or because I disassociate, or because I keep having this pattern that repeats. And so what I try to work with people on is, this is a normal trauma reaction. It is a memory that you are reawakening and need to get worked through, versus staying stuck in the shame. So one of the pieces that is now well known about early trauma on the brain is that probably all of us who are adoptees have an overactive brain stem. That means that it's an overdeveloped, highly sensitive part of our brain, that we are overreactive to quick, to startle responses, to sounds, There's fear of abandonment, but there also can be a fear of closeness. We can have small things have big reactions. Bessel van der Kolk calls it the smoke detector of the brain. Like, if you notice, almost all the adoptees I work with will have this sort of stare where they look out the window, or they're always looking like, is there something coming down the road? Is there something I need to be prepared for? So that's hypervigilance, which is very common with adoptees. So this is Bruce Perry wrote an article called Incubated in Terror, and talks about the overactive brainstem reactions. So if you have the adoption piece and then you still have other things in the environment, I had parents who smoked, I had parents who fought a lot, I had parents who didn't know how to soothe an infant and that would let me cry for excessive periods. You will have more of a overreaction of the brainstem than the midbrain areas. And then many adult adoptees have talked about that it's now being named complex developmental trauma. So this is just an overview of measures of mental health. Adoptees are only moderately higher than non-adoptees, but their chances of having contact with a mental health professional are double what non-adoptees have. Also, adoptees have more ODD is oppositional defiant disorder, which, think about, like, you have a kid that is not genetically related to you, who isn't reacting the way that you expect them to have. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety and externalizing problems. But SAD is seasonal affective disorder, or major depressive disorder is MDD. So it's interesting. There's certain mental health areas where, and I think it has to do with the combination of the family environment as well as the adoptive brain, adoptee's brain. So I'm not going to go into this. Bessel van der Kolk wants to create a separate diagnostic called developmental trauma disorder, and I do think that it would be helpful, but it was shot down in the DSM-5. So I won't. That's sort of an interesting statistic for therapists to understand. I'm not going to do this exercise, but this is a meditation that helps me on a regular basis to just do the holding. Many of you probably have done inner child work. So you literally connect to thinking about this inner infant. I do it sometimes with my cat, or I do it with when my babies were infants. I would do this kind of, and it would really repair that sense of having a self that could love this inner child self. So, are you wanting me to stop? I'm not sure if somebody's wanting me to talk. Should I take a break here?
No, nope, keep going.
No, keep going. Okay, thanks. Okay. So, for me as a teenager, there's this whole sense of fraud. Who am I? Who am I really? These people that are my family, they may not even have the same race as I am. So in my case, I went through a struggle with
Somebody can mute.
I was ending
Sorry,
up.
I'm trying to get somebody to mute.
Okay. So as a teenager, I was one of those kids that had a really strong, I hate my mother, she drives me crazy, she's not me. And I've heard this from many adoptees who were very bonded to their mothers. Then when they get to be teens, it becomes like how am I going to separate? And it becomes like a very strong negative reaction of feeling of that your adoptive mother somehow is like uh, to be rejected, or it's really hard to be around her. My mother was a perfectionist, and she was I hate to label people as narcissists or not narcissists. I think that narcissism has a range, and my family, like any other family in the 50s, 60s, 70s, was taught that this is your family, and you're supposed to have put up appearances. And anyway, my mother was so upset with me at age 14 and my developing body and my developing self that she was literally like, we can't do a summer. So she set me up to be a nanny at age 14. And I was a live-in nanny for a stewardess in Edina, which is a rich suburb in Minnesota. I did have suicidal ideation at 17, and that was after I had this intense falling in love for the very first time, and then my boyfriend broke up with me. But I was able to get through each of these. My family did try family therapy a little bit, but I never had a therapist until I was in my 20s. And then I really was like, oh, this is great. I have to learn all about therapy to help people. This is an old article, but it was um, the first one to get this statistic, which is kind of a commonly well-known statistic, that 3 to 4% of it's a higher rate. It's 4% higher of adoptees attempting suicide in grades 7 through 12 compared to 3% of non-adopted peers. So it's well, it is over double, but it is a small percentage total, but like it's a much higher percentage, statistically significant. They found this in a study that was not even trying to pick up on adoption. It just showed up in one of these large prevalence studies. And even higher amount have therapy. So one of the things I work with people on is we have these negative automatic thoughts that often come up, things like, I was just a mistake, or I wasn't really meant to be here. I don't even know if anybody wants me here, So the first therapist that helped me was to help me translate that, okay, even if my first parents couldn't keep me or found a need to relinquish me, God, universe, higher power, some greater power wanted me to be born. So I have told this story before, but when I was suicidal, as a teen, I did go, I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to trigger anybody, but I had a plan, and I was out under a tree in our backyard. Parents were not home. I was alone. And when I was about to, work out my plan, I was visited by like either a voice or an angel, or I'm now wondering if it was like an ancestor that from another side, but basically said, oh, you don't have to go. You have a life. You're going to help a lot of people. You have things to do. And that calmed me right down. And I was able to believe that I had a purpose, something bigger, and that I should try to live out my destiny. So anyway, as I said before, there are always these gifts that we have along with this relinquishment trauma that we have. So people wonder, like, what are the therapies that work? So what I have found is some cognitive behavioral therapy works, but often it needs to be with some kind of somatic. EMDR is called eye movement desensitization and resonance therapy, and it's the eye movement therapy. Now that there's research that says that we're crossing our trauma memories from the right brain to the left brain, and this going back and forth, this right side, left side, seems to add to the treatment by moving these trauma memories from right brain, where they're undifferentiated and all over the place, to left brain, where they become a narrative. Dialectical behavior therapy was very helpful for me when I was a teen and learning it as a therapist. It's basically teaching skills for how to deal with trauma reactions. So it's things like grounding, like sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. When you feel like you're in one of those trauma memories, you can go to the present moment awareness of, what am I looking at? What am I seeing? It gets me out of the shame reaction and then goes into present moment awareness, where you can try to get your brain back and be safe again. Internal family systems is a really interesting, amazing. I believe that many of us adoptees have these parts of self called exiles, which are these little like triggering events. I told you about, I still have triggering events even now, attempting to sleep. So, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll have to go through my whole routine of how to calm myself down and get myself back to sleep. But I now have more skills to be able to do that. There's also I did a full womb surround, which is where you go back and you revisit pre-birth, birth, and then after birth. And I've done that a few times. William Erickson is I think he's in his 80s now, but he's a psychologist from California that I worked with probably like 15 years ago. And then I recently did a thing called Womb Surround, which is part of the cranial sacral therapy people. And it's interesting, cranial sacral people, quite a few of them are adoptive parents. And what they believe, and I'm curious if other people have found this, is that they believe that you can somehow communicate with the infant that you have adopted and try to get them to do their grieving and understand what happened to them. And those kids that have done grieving early don't have as many long-term trauma problems as, we that were born back when they didn't know how to do grief work. I mean, I was literally told if I was upset, grieving, crying, reacting, things like, hey, you've got nothing to cry about, or I'll give you something to cry about, that kind of thing. Which I know even now, parents of any sort don't do that to kids as much as the 50s, 60s, 70s. I already I went backwards. Okay, there, this other way. I love memoir, and I know I saw Anne. I love Anne's memoir. You don't look adopted. This is one called The Language of Blood by Jane. It's Jane Jung. Trenka is I think she's changed her name multiple times, but she's got several books out. But I mean, you can just hear this. My ancestry includes landowners, scholars, and government officials. I have 6 siblings. I'm a citizen of the Republic of Korea. I come from a land of pear fields and streams where people laugh and loudly and honor their dead. Halfway around the world, I am someone else. And see, that's what's so hard, is we have these huge identities that span continents, that span racial, that's what I'm trying to say, is these gifts that adoptees bring, is we are bigger than we know. Our souls were called to be uniting large groups of people. This is from a book, In Their Voices, Black Americans on Transracial Adoption, and so I've heard this also. I've worked with several Black adoptee girls that have white parents. And the problem comes when we as transracial adoptees open the door and walk out into the real world, where we are judged by the color of our skin. While this colorblind mindset may come from a place of good intentions, it ignores the distinct history and realities of race in America. I agree. I also believe that just not having that genetic mirroring is a loss that all adoptees, whether same race or transracial adoptions, have to deal with. If anyone hasn't read this yet, this memoir is just so amazing, because what she's doing is she's weaving three selves together. She has the girl that she is, the girl that she was and never will be, and she goes back and tries to time jump, do time travel back to what it would have been like with her birth father, what it would have been like with her birth mother, and it's like a speculative memoir. So I can't praise this one enough. I'm just going to say a few things about search and reunion. Some adoptees want to search and some do not. Some have secondary rejection. So one of the things I tell therapists is that if you're going to work with an adoptee who's doing search and reunion, you have to get them ready for all the possibilities of what could happen. In my case, I found my birth mother and I was happy to do so, but during our reunion time, she exhibited psychosis and had mental health issues. She was hospitalized. She had to go on olanzapine, which is an antipsychotic medication, and she was able to get back, a lot of herself. But 3 people in my birth family were mentally ill and had psychotic episodes, and so luckily I did not have that. But it's also, it's just the trauma that we have is not just about us. It's also about the children that we adoptees bear going forward. So anyways, I'm supportive of it. I think it's a wonderful thing, but it's also really complex and hard to navigate. I know that Dr. Joyce does a lot of that work with putting yourself back together after reunion. This has been a helpful piece for me. Is this is a quote from Sabon Fu Somé from a book called Welcoming Spirit Home, and I'm just going to read. This is an African view. She was from the Dagara people in Africa. If we view reality from the angle that we come to Earth to fulfill a particular purpose, birth can then be looked at as a contract between this world and the world of the ancestors or other dimensions. This contract is agreed to in different ways. For some parents, it is a conscious choice. For others, it is unconscious. But for the incoming soul, the choice is always a conscious one. In all cases, the choice to be born is welcomed by all ancestors, spirits, and community. And in this sense, we are all part of one large interwoven community, ever growing in this world and in worlds beyond. So I also worked with a Malidoma Patrice Somé, who is like a African shaman. And I asked him specifically about adoption. He said, well, the ancestors probably got together and made an agreement. And this was actually helpful to me to think about, like, the ancestors of my adopted parents and the ancestors of my birth parents, like, had some grand plan. And that it's like hard to think about it that way. But see, a Western culture doesn't think about ancestral healing and about what might be beyond. So I have made a practice of doing ancestral, like meditation, and trying to be in touch with the people 7 generations back, because we're here on this earth for a short time, but we are still, I believe, somehow connected to that ancestral whatever happened. So this is a piece that I think is really important, that the old adoption story didn't really take care of. They talked about, you can have this baby just as if it was born to you. And that was so not true. Each adoptee is unique and can never be a replacement for any other human being. Yes, I found my records and I was able to read what my adoptive father wrote. He had PTSD from World War II, and he said, I want to make sure that my wife isn't left alone if something should happen to me. And so that was his reason for having a child. But I think now people are more aware of, when you adopt a child, you have to know that you are bringing this unique person into your space to be raised by you, and there is no way to just make them your own. They are going to be all the people that they bring together from the birth family and the adoptive experiences that they have in their adoptive family. So many of you know the Adoptees Bill of Rights. We have a right to know our family history. We have a right to know the story of a relinquishment and adoption. We have a right to a true family tree. We have a right to genetic and health information. We have a right to decide how to manage painful information rather than for others choosing to keep it secret, even for our own good or their personal protection. So this is my extended family there. So me and Kathy, and that's one of my son, Matthew and Michael, Craig, and this is my half brother, and then his 3 children. So it affects generations. We have multiple family trees. My children, I did my best to not confuse them by helping them understand, okay, this is Grandma Kathy, this is Grandma Betty, this is Grandpa Bill, this is Grandpa Byrne. And the families need to help the adoptee manage it. I think too much is put on the adoptee alone, that we're supposed to figure out how to manage all these people and all these complex relationships. So anyway, in conclusion, I'll take some time now to, so this will give us some good time to answer questions. And I did put one little thing I wanted to mention, I'll just finish up with, if any of you have heard of the television show that's on Hulu now called The Fosters, all through the pandemic and like for the past few years, there's like 5 seasons. I have found that show to be such a joy to watch, because it let me have this whole fantasy of, oh, what if I were adopted by 2 wonderful lesbians in California that raised me with full awareness of trying to understand my, genetic history and, anyway, so it's a complex show. Some people might not like it, but anyway, it was quite, I really enjoyed watching that whole series. Yes, thank you to NAAP and Untangling Our Roots, and my contact information is here on this slide. So I'm going to stop share and we'll go to questions and answers. Yay.
Hey, Sharon, this is Jennifer. There is a question in the chat that I wanted to make sure. Where would they get a copy of that study regarding the suicide rates?
Oh, it's in the end of the slides. I have all the references listed, and if you just Google the name of the first author, I believe his name is Slap. It's a very well-known study. There's been a bunch afterwards. That was one of the first ones that I found. So that's why I use, but there's more since then that have found it is, yeah, anyway, so,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, sure. Okay, so I see Susan. Should I just take hands raised first and then go to the chat questions? Okay,
Go ahead with Susan.
there she is. Susan,
Yeah.
do you want to ask your
Hi.
question? Yeah, hi.
Yes. Hi, I think I heard you. Weren't you at one of like either the Celia Center convention or the other one? It feels like I heard some of your story or saw your pictures. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. You seemed familiar to me, but that's not my question. My question is, I just loved what you said. Where were you when I was in high school? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Since I was 8 years old, I fell in love with John Galinsky, and he finally asked me out when I was 17, and I was the homecoming queen cheerleader, the most popular girl in my class, and he was the homecoming king. And my mother read my diary, and she asked us to break up. We were enmeshed. I even quit drinking for him. I mean, it was like I loved him like air. And I walked into home group one day, and I looked up, and I realized he wasn't coming back, and I literally went somewhere in my head. This girl was talking to me, and she started going like this, Sue. And I don't think, I'm now 62 years old. That happened when I was 17. I don't think I've ever come all the way back. I went somewhere in my head. It was like, it's like I was there. I could talk, but I was never the same. It was like the pain was so great of that love and connection. And then the break, I don't think my system could have handled it. And went to college early and, ended up coming into AA and, ended up in the streets, et cetera. But what you said